Welcome to this walkthrough of the first assignment for CPI 111. In this assignment we're going to be following the tutorial that's included inside GameMaker 8. It shows up when you first open up the program. If for some reason you don't see it or you can't find it in your version of GameMaker Pro, the tutorial document is available in the assignments folder on the course Blackboard site under assignment 1, so you can find it there. You should have it open when you go through and do the project yourself. Before we start creating our new game, I'll show you quickly what the finished version looks like. I'm just clicking play. I've already got the file open here on my own computer. It's going to load it, and let's take a look. Brian's super fun game. You'll see there are some fruit that are zipping around the screen at different speeds. The goal of the game is to click on those fruit to earn points without clicking on a bomb. Clicking on the bomb will end the game. So for example, I can click on this little cherry and you'll see that I get 10 points. I get more points for clicking on faster fruit, less points for clicking on slower fruit, and then if I click on a bomb, the game ends and calls up the score screen where I can enter in my name. So let's get started. If you've gone through the beginning of the course book, you'll already know what elements are included inside the game development interface. I'm not going to go through those now. I'm just going to jump in and start creating this game. So let's first create some sprites to show on our screen. When I create sprites or anything inside GameMaker, I like to follow a systematic naming scheme. This helps me be clear on what type of element I'm working with at a given moment. It also makes it easier as I develop more complex projects or when I'm working with a team creating a project to be able to quickly find objects and elements of different types. So here's the naming scheme that I suggest you use. Start the name of any element that you're creating using a 3-letter sort of abbreviation to indicate what type of element you're creating. In this case, we're going to create a sprite, so I'm going to call it SPR underscore, and then the second part of the name will be whatever that object is that I'm actually creating. I'm going to start a new project here. I had my old one open. So again, SPR. The first sprite we're going to create is going to be a wall. And the wall is going to be eventually an object that is around the outer edges of our screen when the game is playing. So I've named it SPR underscore wall. I select load sprite to choose the image that's going to be represented by this sprite. I'm going to choose the wall image. This is inside the sprites folder in the directory where you installed your GameMaker 8 program. If you look, I'll show you briefly. Here's GameMaker 8 inside my program files, and then inside GameMaker 8 is a sprites folder. Inside the sprites folder is a tutorial 1 folder, and if I click on that, then I get this collection of images. So I'm going to choose the wall image and then just say OK. Next, I'm going to create another sprite that is going to be a banana. So I call it SPR underscore banana and choose load sprite and select the image and say open and then OK. Rather than go through each of these sprite creation steps in the tutorial, I'll let you do that on your own, and I'll skip ahead in this recorded version. But you're going to want to go through and create sprites for each of the images that's inside that tutorial 1 folder. Okay, so welcome back. I'm assuming you've created all of your sprites. I've created all of mine. Now we have sprites. We need to create now that we have the sprites, we need to create some objects and then associate these sprites with those objects. And as you'll remember from the introduction in the book and in class, the objects are really the main core component of any game in GameMaker or any other game-making engine. Objects are the things that show up on the screen and that can react to input from the player or from other objects inside the game. To create an object, you want to go to your toolbar and click on the blue orb. When you do that, you'll get the object window. Let's use our naming scheme by starting the name of our first object, obj underscore, and we're going to create a wall object. By default, any object you create has no sprite associated with it unless you tell it to have a sprite. So we're going to do that now. Our wall object is going to have the wall sprite associated with it. So I click on the drop-down menu icon next to the sprite selector box, choose sprite wall. And then in our game, if you think about what happens, we're going to have fruit flying around the screen and they're going to bounce off the wall and then continue to fly around the screen. In order for those fruit objects to bounce off the wall needs to be solid. So in our object properties window, we're going to select the solid checkbox. And there aren't going to be any other events or actions associated with the wall. It's just going to sit there and be solid. So we can say, OK. Next, let's create one of our fruit objects and add some events and actions to that object so that it can work the way it's supposed to in the game. So again, I select the object button. I'm going to create the apple object, so obj underscore apple. Select the apple sprite. This object does not need to be solid. We're going to have some events and some actions associated with the object that will cause it to bounce off the wall and do what it's supposed to do without it needing to be selected as solid here. So let's go ahead and add some events to this apple object so that it will do the things we need it to do. To add an event to an object, you simply click on the Add Event item, and then you choose which kind of event you want to add. We're going to choose a Create event. This is an event that will take place just once when the object first appears in the game. So we've created an event, but we don't have any action associated with that event. The action that we want to occur when the apple object first appears on screen is we want it to start moving around in some direction at a constant speed. So we're going to choose a move action. We're going to choose the very first icon in the move section of the action palette. It's called Move Fixed, and you can either click on it or you can drag it. I'll just drag it over. When I do that, it opens up a window that lets me set the initial settings for this action. I'm going to have the Apple object move in one of any of these directions, up, down, left, right, or at diagonal. And I'm going to set the speed to 8. And then say, OK. Another action that we need to have happen is that we need the Apple object to bounce off the wall when it runs into it. So we're going to add another event, a collision event. And then we need to tell this event what object are we going to look for in terms of a collision. And we're going to look for the wall. So it's an event that will occur when the Apple object collides with the wall. And what is it that we want to have happen? Well, we want it to bounce off the wall. Thankfully, under the Move palette, the very last object is the bounce. We'll drag that over and click OK. So now the object will move when it's created. It will bounce off the wall. we also need to set up the Apple object so that a player can click on it and earn points for clicking on it. So we come over, we're going to add another event. This is going to be a mouse event, and it's going to be an event that occurs when the player presses down on the left mouse button. So choose the left pressed object from the drop-down menu. And what do we want to have happen? What's the action associated with that event? First, we're going to make it so that when the player left clicks on that Apple object, the object itself is going to disappear and reappear somewhere else on the screen. To make that happen, we're going to go to the Jump toolbox, select the Jump to Random action, and say OK. Another thing we want to have happen when the player clicks on that object is we want to give them some points. So we're going to go down to the Score tab in the Actions palette, and we're going to choose the very first item under Score, which is the Set Score action. We're going to add 50 points whenever the player clicks on an Apple object. To add 50 points, rather than just give them a set score of 50 points, we need to select the relative radio box so that it will add 50 to whatever the current score is. And we say OK. And then let's save that. Right now we've got a couple of objects, but they don't exist in any location inside our game. We need to have them show up on the screen somewhere. And in order to do that, we need to create a room. You can think of this as a level or a box on screen where all the action is going to take place. To create a room, we're going to go up to the Create a Room icon on the menu, click on it, and then we'll get the Room Properties window will appear. I'm going to expand it out. And from this Room Properties window, we can add objects to the screen. The first object we want to add is the wall, and the wall is going to be all around the outer edges of our room. To make it easier to place each of those wall objects, I'm going to change the snap settings from what they're set as by default, 32 by 32, I'm sorry, 16 by 16. I'm going to change that to 32 by 32. I'm making this change because each of our objects is 32 by 32 pixels in size. And what this will allow me to do is to drag out objects and they'll snap in place on the grid where each cell is the same size as the object. Now, in order to place the wall object, I need to make sure that I have selected the wall object as the thing I'm going to add when I click out here. To do that, I come down here on the left-hand side of the room window to the object to add with left mouse. I'm going to click on the drop-down menu and choose Object Wall. When I do that, it will appear so that I know this is the object that's going to be added. Then I simply come out to the room and click where I want a hunk of that wall to appear. Now I can go one by one and click each of these in place. If I make a mistake and place a wall object in the wrong location, I can right-click and it will delete it off of the room. A quicker way to place these, though, is to hold down the Shift key and then hold down the left mouse button and then just move my mouse and it will place those wall objects all the way along where I move my mouse. So I've got all of the wall objects where they're supposed to be. Now I need to place a few copies or instances of that Apple object out onto the room. So I'm going to select the Apple object and then I'll just click wherever. I'll add one here, I'll add one here, and I'll add one here. At this point, it's a good idea to save my work, and I'm going to test my game to make sure that these apples bounce around as they're supposed to and that they actually bounce off the walls. And if I click on them, I get some points. So going up to my toolbar and click on Save, I'm going to give my project a name. When you do your project for your assignment number 1, you want to make sure to give it your name and then the name of the assignment, assignment 1. Then to test my game, I'm going to click on the green icon on the toolbar that will compile and then run the game. Depending on how fast or slow your computer is, this may take some time before it shows up on the screen, and the more complex your project gets, the longer it will take to compile. So you'll see, as I hoped, our apples are bouncing around, hitting the walls and bouncing off, and if I click on one, a score will appear in the top of my game window, 50 points. Okay, for the next step in this project, let's add a background image to our room to make it look a little better. If you go up to the toolbar, look for the background icon, create a background, click on the load background, and if you go into GameMaker 8 backgrounds, you'll find the tutorial 1 folder, and click on the wood image. Say OK, and following our naming scheme, let's give this a name. I'll call it back_wood, and say OK. Now, in order to place this background into our room, we need to open up our room that we created earlier. So open that up, and I'll expand it out so you can see it a little bit better. Click on the Backgrounds tab, and then you'll see about midway down the options, there's a place for you to choose the background. Click on the drop down and select that background image of wood that you just picked. So now we have a nice background. Next, let's add some sound to the game. First, we'll add a sound effect that will play each time the player clicks on a fruit. So let's go up to the toolbar again, click on the image of the little speaker, and choose Load Sound. Come into the GameMaker Sounds Tutorial 1 folder and pick the click sound and say Open. Then again, we're going to follow our same naming scheme and give this the name SND Click and say OK. So I actually have the sound now, but we need to change things with our apple so that that sound will play when a player clicks on the apple. So let's come over to our apple object and open it up, and let's take a look at our options. And before, we had created an event called left press, if you remember, and we set it up with a couple of actions so that when the player clicks the left mouse, the Apple object will move somewhere else on screen and the player will get 50 more points. So we're going to add a new action to this left press event, and it's going to be the sound one. So click on the main 1 tab, and then you'll see right in the middle there's a section for sounds. Click and drag the play sound icon, and then it'll open up the settings. In this case, we need to tell it which sound to play, so click on the drop down menu and choose that sound that we just set up a few minutes ago, and look at the loop option. We don't want the sound to loop. We don't want it to keep playing repeatedly. We just want it to play once. So we'll leave it to false and click on OK. And then click OK again. At this point, let's test this out to make sure the sound works. So save our project and click on the play button. Okay, so we've got our apples moving around. Now we have the wood background. Let's see if I can click on one. Get a nice sound effect playing, and we earn our 50 points. Let's close that out and let's continue. So we've got sound now that will play when we click on something. It'd be nice to have some music as well. So let's go ahead and create another sound. So click on the Create Sound. Let's call this one SND_music. Click on the Load Sound option or button, and then choose Music. This is a MIDI file again in that Tutorial 1 folder, inside the Sounds folder, inside the GameMaker folder. And click on OK. So we've got the sound, that music now in the game, but we need to have a way to make that sound play. So here's how we're going to do it. First of all, we're going to have to create an object. So let's create a sound object. And here's how we're going to do that. Click on the little blue ball. This is the one you remember we used to create objects. Give it the name obj_music. Unlike all the objects that we created earlier, this music object has no sprite. There's no image associated with it because we're not going to see it anywhere on the screen. We're just going to hear music playing. So we've got the object created. So now we need to add an event and then we need to add an event to our music object, and then we have to have an action with it. So click on the Add Event button, and we're going to do a Create Event. We've done this before with our other object, our Apple object. And then we need to have an action with it. Not too surprisingly, our action is going to be one that plays the sound. So click on the Main 1 tab, go down to the middle, click and drag the sound over. Choose our music sound that we just added. This time, though, we want the loop option set to true so that the music will play over again. When it reaches the end, it'll play over and over and over and over. So basically what will happen with this music object is as soon as it is, the first time it appears in the game, it will play the sound that's assigned to it. So let's click and say OK. So we have the object. Just like we did with the Apple object, though, we have to place this music object in our room so that it will actually take place when the game is started. So let's open up our room object. And just like we did when we were putting our wall objects and our apples out here, we need to come down on the left-hand side and select that music object. And then just click. It doesn't really matter where you place this. It's going to be invisible anyway. But following the tutorial, we'll place it here in the upper left-hand corner of our room. Because there's no sprite associated with this music object, GameMaker by default will place a little tiny blue dot with a question mark in it. So let's try this now and see if it works. So we save. So now we've got our music playing. Click on an apple. We get a little sound effect and a score. Now that we've done that, let's make our game a little bit more interesting. What we're going to do is add more fruit objects. We've already created our apple object. Now let's go ahead and create objects to go along with our other fruit sprites, banana, cherry, and strawberry. To do this, all you need to do, well, there are a couple ways to do it. One is to go through the whole process you did before when we created the apple object. Another option is to take that apple object and make a duplicate of it, and then just change the properties, the variables associated with that object that we want to switch. Let me show you how this works. So I'm going to come over on the left-hand side to the object section, and I'm going to right-click on my apple object and choose Duplicate. When I do that, it'll open up a window, and what you'll see is that all of the events that were associated with our apple object are now automatically associated with this duplicated object. Let's turn this duplicate into a banana object. So I'll call it obj underscore banana. I need to change the sprite to the banana sprite. Then what I'm going to do is go over to the create event, click on the action, the move action, and I'm just going to change the speed. And what I'm going to do is make this a really hard one to click on. So I'm going to speed it up to 10. And then I'm going to come down to the left pressed and go to the score, and I'm going to raise that score up to 75. So it's moving faster, so it's harder to click on, so if they actually make it, it will give them more points. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and create a cherry and a strawberry object, and I'm going to make both of those slower actually, and then give fewer points for clicking on them. I'd like you to do this on your own. I won't do this with the lesson running, but I'll come back once I've got it done and we'll continue on from there. Welcome back. So I have, using that duplicate command, have created other objects for all the other fruit. Now I need to add them to our room. So again, I'm going to make sure I've got my room open, which I already do. And then I'm going to come down to the object selection area, and I'll choose the banana, and I'll add 3 of those, this or wherever, out in the room, and then I'll do the same thing for the strawberry, and for the cherry. Alright, and I'm going to save that and run it just to make sure everything's working. I have all kinds of fruit. Now one thing I want you to notice is with these cherries, I've made it so that they can only go across or up or down, and they're really slow, so you see if I click on it, it's only 10 points. And the strawberry's a little bit quicker points, and I got those zipping around bananas. So the game's starting to come together. But there are things that we can do to make it a little bit more fun. Right now, there's no way really to lose the game. Basically, you just click on stuff and you keep getting more points. So I'm going to create a bomb object and then add a few events to that bomb object, so that we can make things a little more challenging. So let's go ahead and do that now. First of all, I'm going to have a new sound, and this is going to be an exploding bomb sound. So I'll name it SND underscore explosion. Click on the load sound and choose the explosion sound. And I've already got my bomb sprite. I created that a while ago. So I'm going to create a new object now. That's going to be my bomb object. And I'm going to choose the bomb sprite. Then I need to have some events again that are going to allow me to have the player lose the game essentially when they accidentally click on the bomb. So let's do a create event. So click on the add event button, choose create, and what we'd like to have happen is for the bomb to appear at a random place on the screen. So just like we did before with our fruit objects, you remember we set up an action so that when the player clicked on the fruit it would move to a location on screen. Well, we're going to do the same thing here, but we're going to have that happen when we create it, when it first shows up on screen. So we're going to go to the jump section and click on the move to a random position and say OK. Now we need to add a click event similar to what we do with our fruit. So let's click on add event, let's do mouse, and we'll choose left pressed. What we want to have happen when the player clicks on a bomb is we want the game to end, and we want to show the player his or her score, and allow them to enter their name in a high score list of players. First of all, though, we need to have some sound play, of course, when they click on the bomb. So let's go to our main 1 tab and choose the sound event, and then let's choose that explosion noise. There we go. And we don't want it to loop, so we leave it false. We say OK. Once it plays the explosion sound, then we're going to show the score. So come over to the Score tab, click on it, and the high score list is in the Score section. Drag that over. You can choose a background image if you like, and show a border. You can change the colors and so on. We can choose that same background we used before, the wood. We'll choose a different color. Let's do something sort of dark so it shows up against our wood. I'll do like a green. And say OK. That will show our high score table. Then we want to restart the game. And that's under the main 2 tab underneath the game section. You can restart the game. Oh, you know, there's one more thing I want to do. Right now what will happen is the player will click on that bomb, and immediately that high score table is going to appear on screen. So they don't get there isn't any time for them to really recognize the reason why that high score table is appearing. So I'm going to give a little bit of time for them to sort of notice that they've clicked on the bomb. In order to do that, we're going to add in the sleep function. So over on the action palette here, select the main 2 tab, choose the sleep action, and drag it on over. And we can choose now how long we want the game to wait before it does the next action on the list. And it's set to 1,000 milliseconds, which is 1 second. That's enough time. And so we'll allow them to wait a second. Now you gotta make sure this is in the right spot. So it should come right after the explosion sound. If it's not in the right spot, you can drag it up and down to make sure that it's in the right location. So we've got that happening. We've created our bomb object. And to test this out, let's place a bomb out here in our room just to make sure it works. So make sure you've got the bomb object selected, and then just add the bomb. Save your game and then test it. There's our bomb just sitting there. So I click on it, I get an explosion, a minute passes, and I don't get any score because I didn't actually click on anything. And then the game restarts. Alright, that's pretty good. Let's remove the bomb we placed out there as a tester. Now we get to the part where we're going to use our alarm clock. And what we're going to use the alarm clock for is to have a new bomb appear on screen every 2 seconds. To make this happen, we're going to add an event in sort of a weird place. We're going to add an event to our music object, the one that we created earlier. So open up your music object, and we're going to add an event to this music object. We're going to go to the main 2 tab, and you'll see under the timing, one of the event actions is called set alarm. We're going to drag that over here, and we're going to set it equal to 60, which is 2 seconds. And we're going to choose alarm 0. When the background music first appears in the game, which is at the beginning of the game, a couple of things are going to happen. One is we're going to start hearing the background music, and the second thing that's going to happen is an alarm clock is going to be set for 2 seconds. and it's going to immediately start counting down. The next thing we want to have happen is we're going to create another event going with this music object, and it is going to be an alarm event. And we're going to choose alarm 0. Okay. Then what we want to do is we need to add an action to this alarm 0 so that when that alarm that we just set to 2 seconds counts down to 0, it's going to trigger the action that's associated with this event, with this alarm 0 event. What we want to happen when this alarm 0 gets triggered is we want to create a new bomb. So over in the main 1 tab of the actions palette, choose the little light bulb. That's a create instance action. And we need to, under the object section, select our bomb object. And just say OK. Then what we want to do, because we want to keep creating new bombs every couple seconds, we need to set the alarm again. So go to the main 2 tab, choose the alarm, set it again to 60, and aim it, direct it at alarm 0, and say OK. Save that. Close it. Now we don't actually have to place a bomb out on the screen. It's going to be done automatically using the alarm clock and the music object. So let's save it and run it and check to see if it's working properly. Here's our game. A bomb appears, another bomb appears, another bomb appears. We've got bombs showing up all over the place here. Click on one, the second passes, and my top score thing comes up. So that's working pretty well. It's, you know, it's a little easy, I think, with the bombs just sitting there. So I might change my bomb object a little bit. Let's open up this bomb object. And we've got it jumping to a random position when it's created. But I'd like it to do something similar to what the fruit does, in that I want it to actually move. So I'm going to use my move fixed action inside the create event for the bomb object. And I'm going to have it just move really slow. I'm going to move it like 3. In order to have our bomb object that is now moving also bounce off the walls, we have to do to it the same thing we did to our fruit, which is we need a bounce event. So click on the add event, choose collision, and select the wall object. And then for an action, we need to have it bounce. So our bomb appears, starts moving down, bounces off the wall, and we're getting all kinds of bombs appearing. So now we're getting somewhere. Now our game's getting a little harder and harder. Could make it harder yet if we made it so that the bombs are moving a little faster. So now we're almost done with our game and almost done with the first assignment. The very last thing we're going to do is provide some instructions to the player on how to actually play the game. It's very simple to do this. If you look over on the left-hand side of your editor, near the bottom there is a section called Game Information. If you open that up, you'll get a basic editor in which you can write some instructions on how to play the game. So I won't write real instructions, but I'll ask you in your assignment to add in some very clear and simple instructions to let the player know what they're supposed to do. In order for a player to be able to view those instructions, they need to press the F1 key. That itself is questionable how they're going to know they need to press the F1 key, but we'll worry about that in later assignments. For now, just enter in the instructions. That's it. For your own assignment, go in, create all of the basic elements of the game. You need to have your fruit objects moving at different speeds. They need to give differing scores. You need to have bombs that appear on the screen and end the game, and you need to show the high score menu. Be creative, though. In addition to the basic elements of the game, you can and should find interesting and innovative changes that you could make to the game. For example, you could have different backgrounds. You don't have to use fruit. You could have something else for your sprites, for example. You could put floating heads of your friends that are moving around that people have to click on. You can use different sounds. Think of creative ways that you can make this game more interesting. Finish it all up, make sure it all works, and then submit it. That's it. Thank you very much.